Where are the valued resources? How do they occur? And will they be impacted by sea level rise? To answer this question, the Southeast Natural Resource Leaders Group, or SNRLG, started Phase 2 by gathering data sets specific to the essential attributes in the Albemarle-Pamlico region of North Carolina. These data sets are located on a web-based GIS viewer hosted by UNC Asheville's NEMAC so that the SNRLG agencies can view and share relevant data throughout the Phase 2 process. To determine areas of value that will be impacted by sea level rise, SNRLG used a selection process based on probabilistic map algebra in order to identify SNRLG's areas of interest within the Albemarle-Pamlico region. This process takes the data categorized by the essential attributes and overlays them with data to determine which areas represent agency values that will be impacted by sea level rise. The core of the selection process uses probabilities to determine the likelihood that an area of value will be impacted by sea level rise. These likelihoods are expressed using influence diagrams, or Bayesian belief networks. Bayesian belief networks are based on probabilities where historic data can provide a range of states in a node. A scenario or story can be created by selecting states across multiple nodes. Here you can see an example of the type of model used for this project. In this model, each of the nodes are connected and represent the data from the 8 essential attributes. In the center of the model, each dataset is connected to a node which represents each of the 20 counties in the Albemarle-Pamlico region. As you make selections of the states in each dataset or node, you can see the likelihood that any one of these counties would fit our criteria and be potential areas for adaptive capacity in the face of sea level rise, as well as which agency owns the corresponding land. The combination of certain nodes and states in the belief networks help to assemble stories for the region. These stories describe different themes that SNRLG is interested in exploring, which are based on the essential attributes and help indicate which areas in the Albemarle-Pamlico meet the criteria. For example, the first story is the natural areas story. This story has a focus on those areas that are classified as natural and where the ability to take action is potentially possible. The first story includes evidence entered for the following data sets. Distance to roads, a societal attribute that represents distance to roads. Land ownership, a factor that represents protected areas based on ownership of land. National Land Cover Database, an attribute that provides generalized land cover characteristics of the land surface, such as urban, agriculture, and forested areas, percent impervious surface, and percent tree canopy cover. And Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, MODIS satellite data that is correlated with biomass in a standard measure of greenness. Here you can see the selected nodes that describe this story. As we select the data for each of our nodes in the natural model, that is, we selected high distance to roads, non-federal land ownership, natural land cover, and a high greenness index, we can see which counties fit all of those criteria, and we can export a map that shows the distribution of those areas or pixels that fit that criteria. From this output map, you can see that Hyde, Onslow, and Craven counties all have a high percentage of pixels that fit those criteria. The second story focuses on those areas where there is waterfowl habitat connected by biotic corridors and natural heritage areas. This story includes the following datasets. Waterfowl habitat, or areas that are suitable habitats for waterfowl dispersed across the landscape. Significant natural heritage areas, a dataset identifying sites, terrestrial or aquatic, that has particular biodiversity significance. A site's significance may be due to the presence of rare species, rare or high-quality natural communities, or other important ecological features. Southeast Ecological Framework, a dataset that locates important ecological hubs and passageways or corridors to connect them. And National Land Cover Database, an attribute that provides generalized land cover characteristics of the land surface, such as urban, agriculture, and forested areas, percent impervious surface, and percent tree canopy cover. And here's the output map that represents the counties that fit the criteria. As you can see, Dare, Hyde, and Carteret counties all have a high percentage of pixels that meet those criteria. The third story focuses on minority and low-income areas and areas containing public drinking water supply sources that are targeted for watershed improvement. The drinking water story includes the following datasets. Environmental justice, a dataset that is used to delineate sensitive areas of the population, e.g. minority and low income, from non-environmental justice areas. First-order streams, a comprehensive set of digital spatial data representing the surface water of the United States using common features such as lakes, ponds, streams, rivers, canals, and oceans. Priority watersheds identifies watershed priorities within each of North Carolina's 17 river basins that represent the best opportunity for watershed improvement. Southeast Ecological Framework, a dataset that locates important ecological hubs and passageways or corridors to connect them. And Public Water Supply, a dataset of well locations used to assist governmental agencies and others in making resource management decisions through use of a GIS. As you can see, Onslow, Craven, and Carteret counties have the highest likelihood of meeting each of these criteria. With so many datasets used as input for creating the resulting belief map for this story, the results are relatively sparse as compared to the other stories. The final story focuses on the areas where there are existing locations for tourism with high recreation potential. The story also addresses the concept of protecting and considering future areas of tourism and recreation. This story includes the following datasets: Registered Historic Places, Single Points of Registered Historic Places, and the Southeast Ecological Framework, Recreational, which locates important ecological hubs and creates passageways or corridors to connect them as they relate to recreational potential, such as boating waterways. The resulting belief map is somewhat illustrative, showing that a large amount of the pixels meeting the conditions of this story are along major waterways and on the barrier islands. The final focus areas for Phase 2 were selected by the work group based on the overlay of each of the SNRLG stories. During this process, the SNRLG work group also overlaid sea level rise data, 40 centimeters, to help determine which areas may be vulnerable to sea level rise and which areas may be adjacent to sea level rise. Using the story belief maps overlaying on each other, the SNRLG work group was then able to identify 7 potential areas of interest for future projects. The nomination of these areas was done by looking at clusters of pixels in the story maps and determining if there were any obvious gaps in between the clusters. If any of these gaps were located in proximity to the sea level rise coverage, then the location was nominated as an area of interest. The nominated 7 areas are comprised of 3 regions located in Onslow and Jones County, along the Roanoke River, and in Dare County. With the identification of these regions, the SNRLG partners are now better suited to address adaptive capacity by investing resources in these regions.